Lazy Dreamer ASMR. Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to my ASMR channel. Tonight, I thought that I would read a little bit of this Stephen King book. This is my favorite Stephen King book ever written. It's called Joyland. It's a hard case crime book. And I read this first when I was maybe 15, so long time ago. And it's really stuck with me ever since. I think it's because I'm kind of a fan of amusement theme park settings, and it has like a supernatural kind of theme to it, and it's a coming of age book, and of course there's a murder mystery in it. So I've read a lot of different Stephen King books. I have a lot of other of his books that are very near and dear to my heart. Like, for example, I've read The Shining, The Long Walk, Mr. Mercedes. I haven't read it yet. That is on my reading list. But like, I've read a lot of his books, and for some reason this just stayed with me. So feel free to judge that if you want, but for tonight, I thought that I could do a little bit of relaxing reading from this book. So, you probably won't be able to see much of the pages just because my lighting is very dim, but I'm going to hold the book like this, and so I'll be able to read it, and hopefully it'll relax you guys. And yeah, so without further ado, let's begin. This is the little passage before the book begins. I stashed my basket of dirty rags and turtle wax by the exit door in the arcade. It was 10 past noon, but right then, food wasn't what I was hungry for. I walked slowly along the track into Horror House. I had to duck my head when I passed beneath the screaming skull, even though it was now pulled up and locked in its home position. My footfalls echoed on a wooden floor painted to look like stone. I could hear my breathing. It sounded harsh and dry. I was scared, okay? Tama told me to stay away from this place, but Tom didn't run my life any more than Eddie Parks did. Between the dungeon and the torture chamber, the track descended and described a double S curve, where the cars picked up speed and whipped the riders back and forth. Horror House was a dark ride, but when it was in operation, this stretch was the only completely dark part. It had to be where the girl's killer had cut her throat and dumped her body. How quick he must have been, and how certain of exactly what he was going to do. I walked slowly down the double S, thinking it would not be beyond Eddie to hear me and shut off the overhead work lights as a joke, to leave me in here, to feel my way past the murder site with only the sound of the wind and that one slapping board to keep me company. And suppose, just suppose, a young girl's hand reached out in that darkness and took mine. So that was the little text before the book begins. So it says Joyland by Stephen King. I don't know if you can read that. It is a hard case crime novel. It says for Donald Westlake. Joyland. Alrighty. So, another interesting thing about this book is I don't think it works in terms of chapters. There are little hearts that kind of break up the entries in this book, so let's get into it. I had a car, but on most days in that fall of 1973, I walked to Joyland from Mrs. Shoplaw's beachside accommodations in the town of Heavens Bay. It seemed like the right thing to do. The only thing, actually. By early September, Heaven Beach was almost completely deserted, which suited my mood. That fall was the most beautiful of my life. Even 40 years later, I can say that, and I was never so unhappy. I can say that, too. People 7 in the morning. When I left my second floor apartment by the outside stairs, if I started with a light jacket on, I was wearing a tie around my waist. Before I'd finish half the 3 miles between the town and the amusement park, I'd make Betty's Bakery my first stop, grabbing a couple of still warm croissants. My shadow would walk with me on the sand, at least 20 feet long. Hopeful gulls smelling the croissants in their waxed paper would circle overhead. And when I walked back, usually around 5, although sometimes I stayed later, there was nothing waiting for me in Heavens Bay, a town that mostly went sleepy by when summer was over. My shadow walked with me on the water. If the tide was in, it would waver on the surface, seeming to do a slow hula. Although I can't be completely sure, I think the boy and the woman and their dog were there from the first time I took that walk. The shore between the town and the cheerful, blinking grimcrackery of Joyland was lined with summer homes, many of them expensive. Most of them clapped shut after Labor Day, but not the biggest of them, the one that looked like a green wooden castle. A boardwalk led from its wide back patio to where the seagrass gave way to fine white sand. At the end of the boardwalk was a picnic table shaded by a bright green beach umbrella. In its shade, the boy sat in his wheelchair, wearing a baseball cap and covered from the waist down by a blanket, even in the late afternoons when the temperature lingered in the 70s. I thought he was 5 or so, surely no older than 7. The dog, a Jack Russell Terrier, either lay beside him or sat at his feet. The woman sat on one of the picnic table benches, sometimes reading a book, mostly just staring out at the water. She was very beautiful. Going or coming, I always waved to them, and the boy waved back. She didn't, not at first. 1973 was the year of OPEC oil embargo, the year Richard Nixon announced that he was not a crook, the year Edward G. Robinson and Noel Cowell died. It was Devin Jones's last year. I was a 20-year-old virgin, or 21-year-old virgin with literary aspirations. I possessed 3 pairs of blue jeans, 4 pairs of jockey shorts, a clunker Ford, but with a good radio, occasionally suicidal ideations, and a broken heart. Sweet, huh? The heartbreaker was Wendy Keegan, and she didn't deserve me. It's taken me exactly